The AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Emily's List is canvassing the country, encouraging and training women to run for office. Communications Director Vanessa Cardenas tells us how. Labor leader David Rolf describes the Trump administration and Congress as working on a Death Star level of anti-union legislation. And Bill Press talks with Texas Congressman Al Green, who is calling for Trump's impeachment. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Vanessa Cardenas of Emily's List says more and more women are saying they want to run for office, and her organization is training them how. And we say hello to Vanessa Cardenas, who's the Director of Strategic Communications for Emily's List, the progressive organization that seeks to elect more women to national office. She previously was with the Center for American Progress and the World Wildlife Fund. Vanessa Cardenas, thank you very much for joining us today on AmericasDemocrats.org.
Thank you for having me.
It is certainly our pleasure. Now, the day after the inauguration, 500,000 women and others marched in Washington against the Trump agenda. How can that energy be translated into electoral success?
Well, I think that what we're seeing right now is that women are leading the resistance when it comes to what this White House is doing, as well as its allies in Congress. And I think what needs to happen is just to making sure that we are providing women a way to continue being engaged at every level, whether it's at the local, state, or the federal level, and also put forth candidates that really connect with them. And one of the things that we are excited about as an organization that's dedicated to getting more women to run for office is that we are seeing more and more women stepping up and saying, I am not okay with what's happening today at the White House or in our country, and we want to run for office. So I think in the long run, the answer is to make sure that progressives don't lose enthusiasm, that they show up and vote when election comes around, and also that we are enlarging our policy bench of women candidates as well as candidates of color and candidates in general that really connect to the issues that voters care about.
Now, specifically, how do you recruit and train women to run for office, especially since so many studies show that almost no one wants to run given the invasions of privacy and the incivility of the process?
Well, I think that we do a couple of things. I think the first important thing to note is that Emily's List does not just recruit women and only train them. We actually provide them the political advice to win. In the 32 years that Emily's List has been around, we actually have recruited and actually gotten over 800 women elected to local and state office and about 200 to federal office. And how that happens is that the fact that we have a large network of people on the ground that really help us identify those rising stars, those women that have the most important quality to run for office, which for us is a real commitment to their communities and a real passion for the issues. So, an example of that I can give you is Pramila Jayapal, who was just elected to the House last year from the state of Washington. And actually, Pramila started out her career as an immigrant rights advocate, and she was executive director of one of the largest immigrant rights organizations in the state, and really cut her teeth that way, working with people, learning about their issues, being an advocate, and now she's a member of Congress. And for us, that's sort of the story that we look for: women that are grounded in their community, that have a large network, that have a passion for the issues, and that is how we recruit them. And then the next step is that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, no,
that's
I was
okay.
going to say that the next step is really providing them sort of the support so that they know what it takes to run for office. So, what we are known for is that we provide a training that's really a 360-degree training where we teach them not just how to go and hire a campaign team that's really going to help them to run, but also give them the tools to learn how to fundraise, how to get their message out, what kind of consultants they're going to need for their campaign, and also connect them to our over 5 million members that really are committed to seeing more women in office. So for us, it's about first identifying the right candidates that have the right sort of background in their communities and the passion, and supporting them all the way through.
We're speaking with Vanessa Cardenas, the Director of Strategic Communications for Emily's List. Vanessa, would Emily's List support any woman who wants to take on an entrenched Republican, or is there a qualifying standard?
Emily's List is committed to electing pro-choice Democratic women. So for us, that's sort of what we're looking for. We were founded to ensure that women's issues are at the center of the Democratic agenda, and obviously the choice issue is central to us as an organization, and I believe to the Democratic Party. So we are here to get more pro-choice Democratic women because we know that our issues are still under attack.
Now, with a majority of white women voting for Trump, what strategies are needed to win enough back over to the Democratic side?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of I think, of the lessons of 2016, right? That women don't just choose women because of their gender. They want a candidate that really, I guess, resonates with them. The one thing I would say, though, is that in the 2016 election, that educated women did vote. In the majority of educated women did vote for Hillary Clinton versus Trump. But I believe that the last election was really an outlier. I think that President Trump really connected to voters who were just unhappy where our country is going, and really tapped in a fear that exists among many Americans about the changing demographics. So I think for us moving forward, we just really need to make sure that we continue to energize the Democratic electorate, and that we're putting forth candidates that really have that strong connection and speak to the issues that voters care about. And we also have to do a better job about sort of creating that pipeline of candidates that reflect the communities where they come from. So I would also say that in 2016, while it was heartbreaking losing sort of the crown jewel of what we were hoping for, we also won several races with women that are incredible. But I think for us it was a lesson. For example, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada won. She's the first Latina to be elected to the Senate. We had Kamala Harris, also the second African American woman and first Indian American woman in the Senate, that also won her race. As I mentioned, Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, Stephanie Murphy in Florida. So for us, the lesson is that we really need to invest on candidates that have the connections, that are able to speak to the voters on the issues that care about, and that really sort of have a track record of working for their communities. So there is a formula there for next election, not just this year in 2018, but also in 2020.
We're speaking with Vanessa Cardenas, Director of Strategic Communications for Emily's List. A lot of political scientists, Vanessa, say that women now vote their party and their ideology and not their gender. Do you believe that to be true?
I do. I mean, I think, look, electing a woman it was never going to be easy to elect the first woman president, and electing women in general is not easy. I mean, that's why we have the problem that we have, where women are so underrepresented, and women of color especially. So this is not an easy thing. I think that we are breaking new ground, but I think what it is incredible nowadays is that Hillary Clinton did win the majority of the popular vote, that we see so many women stepping up in winning for office across the country, and now with the new energy after Trump's election, we are seeing again, as an organization, we are seeing an unprecedented number of women coming to us asking for a training. Just to give an example, since obviously the election day in November to now, we had over 12,000 women come to us asking us about our trainings. In a regular year, we get less than 1,000. So there's this huge sort of energy that's on the ground, and that's really getting women energized. Because one, I think they were heartbroken about the fact that Hillary Clinton lost, but also they were saying that if she can go through this and actually accomplish all the things that she has done, then we can too. And I think that bodes well for our country.
What do you think of the criticism that the Democratic Party's reliance on a base of interest and advocacy groups, like the women's movement, was a key factor in turning off voters in Middle America?
Look, I think, there's definitely, I think, an argument to be made about how candidates are speaking to voters. I think that, to me, the biggest problem is that only half of our electorate came out and voted. That's I think, the first problem. We need to make sure that, we are engaging a broader swath of the electorate, and we need. I think voters in general are the solution about our political system, and we need to change that. I think the narrative that too often comes out of Washington, and the narrative that sort of permeates across the country, is this narrative that government doesn't work, that nobody's looking out for sort of the average American interest, and that needs to change. And I think the way to do that is to really just continue making sure that we are educating voters, that we are enlarging the electorate, that we're bringing young people in sort of the voting booth, that we're bringing different communities in the voting booth, but we're also speaking to their issues, and we're really also giving them, I think, tangible ideas on how to improve their daily lives. And I think on the women that we have seen that won, they are the ones that are doing that. They are bringing new communities into the political process. They are energizing them with their enthusiasm, but also with the fact that they have done the work on the ground. So I think it's a combination of all of those factors. And this is not easy. Democracy is not easy. It's about really going out there and really, I think, projecting solutions that resonate with voters, and making sure that the party itself reflects the communities that we are trying to connect with.
Okay. Vanessa Cardenas, the Director of Strategic Communications for Emily's List, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Vanessa, we do appreciate your time with us and look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you. This was great.
You are quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen to this americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
This Social Security measure, I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Labor leader David Rolf promises that despite a Death Star level of anti-union activity by Republicans, progressives can work at the local level to raise the minimum wage. More on that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Like rose blossoms, a politician's promises can be beautiful when they burst into full, glorious bloom, only to see them fade over time and, petal by petal, fall away. Take Donald Trump's glorious pledge last year to renegotiate NAFTA and provide a, quote, much better deal for working families. Beautiful. This particular blossom is what convinced many hard-hit former factory workers to vote Trump into the White House. But the bloom is now off Trump's rosy promise, and it looks like working families will get nothing but thorns from him. A recently leaked copy of his NAFTA plan reveals that far from scrapping the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal, White House negotiators are goosing it up with even more power for multinational corporations. In particular, it includes new investor incentives to offshore thousands more of our middle-class jobs. Where did this come from? Right out of last year's discredited and defeated Trans-Pacific Partnership, a scam intended to enthrone corporate supremacy over our own laws. Indeed, the 500 corporate executives and lobbyists who essentially wrote that raw TPP deal have quietly been huddling with Trump's team to draft the plan for this new NAFTA. What about those working people Trump promised to help? Locked out, not even allowed to watch the negotiations, much less have a say in them. The same for consumers, environmentalists, farmers, even members of Congress are being left in the dark, allowed no voice in shaping the deal. This is Jim Hightower saying, but I'm guessing that the 6 Goldman Sachs executives Trump brought in to run our economic policy do have a say, along with his daughter and son-in-law who oversee both our government and the extended Trump family's global business empire. It's a same old NAFTA story. Corporate powers are at the table. You and I are on the menu.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. The Trump administration is the worst in history, says union leader David Rolf, and Democrats need to come up with an economic plan to win back blue-collar voters. And we say hello to David Rolf, who's the president of SEIU 775, the fastest-growing union in the Northwest, representing home care and nursing home workers in Washington State and Montana. He is also a national leader in the fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage. David Rolf, thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Always nice to have you with us. When we last spoke, it was about the local, regional, and then national efforts to establish a $15 an hour minimum wage. Are those efforts out the window, given the Republican control of all branches of government and most state houses?
You know, I believe that most Americans, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Socialist, Green, or anything else, support higher minimum wages. The irony is, I think, is that the party of local control, that is, which the Republicans have often portrayed themselves to be, is going around the country trying to pass laws that preempt or prohibit municipalities from raising minimum wages or addressing other labor standards. I think if you held a vote on a phased-in $15 minimum wage in Congress today, it would pass, but there's no way the leadership is going to let that vote happen. So what I think that means is that we are going to continue to see wage increase efforts succeed in cities and states that either are controlled by or partially controlled by progressives, and we're going to see them succeed in places where the citizens have ballot measure access and can put the question of increased wages directly before the voters on the ballot. Is
this going to be the most anti-labor administration in modern history?
It's going to be the worst administration in modern history. Whether it's the most anti-labor administration or not, I think time will tell. Ronald Reagan's administration was exceedingly anti-labor, and really were, an inflection point in the history of organized labor where unions lost members, lost strikes, the rise of the modern union busting industry and of permanent striker replacements began. Certainly the early signs in a Trump administration are not good, because although Donald Trump himself said almost nothing about unions on the campaign trail, And although he took virtually every position available on the minimum wage, including it should go up, it should go down, it should stay the same, the state should decide, based on what we're seeing in his Department of Labor, certainly the nomination of Andrew Puzder, the first of his nominees to have to withdraw in scandal and shame, was a bad sign. Puzder was the CEO of two hamburger chains, or a holding company for two hamburger chains. 60% of his restaurants had problems with wage theft. 66% of women employees had problems with sexual harassment. And Hardee's, one of the chains, had actually predicted it was going to go out of business back in 1991 if the minimum wage went up again. Now, it's been a long time since 1991. There's been 7 wage increases since then at the federal level. And for good or for ill, they are still in business. But I think when you look, here's what we need to look at. We need to look at the Department of Labor appointments. We need to look at the National Labor Relations Board appointments. We have to look at the budget for labor standards enforcement agencies, and all of those will tell us what path we're on. Certainly, there is a lot of anti-labor pent-up demand inside of the sort of Tea Party branches of the Republicans, and they're hoping that this president will give them a chance to enact sort of a Death Star level of anti-union legislation. Whether the candidate who campaigned on making America great again and bringing back your middle-class job is willing to let that happen is something that only time will tell.
Politically speaking, how do you as a labor leader account for the fact that the so-called white working class in the Rust Belt voted for a president whose promises are empty and policies are downright harmful to their interests?
Well, I think the Democrats lost the last election because they had no economic message and no economic plan. It's exactly why they lost the election of 2014. So if you are struggling, if you have seen your good job replaced by a bad job or by no job, and you've seen your pension go away, the cost of your health plan transferred onto you away from your employer, and you're one of the tens of millions of Americans who are now living an economically less robust life than your own parents did at the same time in their lives, it's very appealing to vote for someone who says they're going to bring your job back and make your life great again. And given that the Democrats were saying almost nothing about economics by the end of the campaign, I don't think it's, keep in mind, Hillary Clinton, who clearly had the most pro-labor policies, actually won the popular vote. But the fact that in a handful of upper Midwestern states, a lot of folks who probably were union members or former union members voted for Donald Trump, I think, because he lied to them and told them he actually had a plan to bring their job back.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with David Rolf, president of SEIU 775, the fastest growing union in the Northwest, representing home care and nursing home workers in Washington State and Montana. And he is also a national leader in the fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage. David, you point out that the old standards of company benefits that underpin a middle-class lifestyle have eroded and that tech companies have created a low-paying, no-benefits gig economy. So what is the answer?
It's true that the era of lifelong employment with a single industry or a single firm is probably over for most people, but it's actually not true that our smartphones are the ones that made all the jobs go away. In fact, or all the benefits go away. It was only a few years after the famous Treaty of Detroit, the union contract that set the pattern in the United States for employer-provided health benefits and employer-provided pensions. That was in 1950, and only 4 years later, I guess you'd have to call him brilliant blender salesman named Ray Kroc, bought the marketing rights to his largest customer, the McDonald's Brothers hamburger stand in San Bernardino. And he created an employment and a business model where the profits were centralized, the risk was decentralized onto franchisees, and the employees were going to live a lifetime of poverty and without benefits for the duration of their employment. No one minded at the time because the employees were then mainly teenagers. Similarly, Kelly Services got a lot of formerly underemployed women who were homemakers and stay-at-home moms into the workforce as temps in the 1960s. And the fact that those jobs didn't have benefits, no one really minded because they was considered extra money for the household, not a way people were going to earn their living. Then in the 70s, we saw domestic outsourcing. In the 80s, we saw global offshoring. Every decade has brought a new innovation in how to stop workers from getting their benefits and making the CEO and the shareholders richer and richer. The latest iteration lives on our smartphones because as we can dial up services, it'll show up in a few minutes, but where someone's only employed for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes while they're bringing us our food or driving us somewhere. What Obama administration wage and hour director David Weil calls the fishering of work is this phenomenon where in order to avoid responsibility or cost, the economic entity you're really working for isn't the one employing you anymore. You're a 1099 subcontractor, you're a temp, you're some other form of non-standard worker. And in general, those are unbenefited jobs, and they're typically not full-time. Those that are full-time may only last for days or weeks, not a lifetime of employment. So my collaborator, Nick Hanauer, and I came up with an idea a couple years ago called shared security, which is modeled after Social Security, where all of the benefits that we historically assign to the employer would instead be owned by the worker. And instead of, let's say, if you're driving for a rideshare service, and it doesn't really make sense. If you're driving for 1 day a week or less than that, you're probably not expecting to get a health plan out of it. But certainly that service could contribute into an account in your name that allows you, or more likely a benefits administrator you select, to figure out how to maximize your benefits with whatever series of jobs, gigs, or income that you earn. So that if you were doing, a little bit of work for a rideshare company, a little bit of work for a delivery company, have a part-time job, and maybe pick up a shift or two as a temp, and it all adds up to something close to full-time employment, but none of it comes with benefits. How do each of those payers or employers contribute towards your benefits in the same way that right now they all would do for Social Security at least in the W-2 economy? So the idea is that everyone should have portable, prorated, and universal benefits like workers' comp, like disability insurance, paid sick leave, vacation time, healthcare, and retirement. But instead of leaving them on the employer's desk when you leave one job and go to the other, those ought to be your benefits that you get to take with you. And if you don't work any single job for very long or full time, you should still be able to earn and accrue them.
Well, your idea of portable benefits for contingent workers based on hourly wages wherever they work, how likely is that to be embraced by employers, unions, and government?
Well, like any new idea, it'll probably be resisted before it's embraced. We all know that's how the system sort of reacts to new ideas. But we published this, Nick Hanauer and I published this article in Democracy Journal in June of 2015. Later that year, we were part of a group of very strange bedfellows on the left and the right, and business and academia, labor and alt-labor, even libertarians, signed a letter that was published on Medium that embraced the idea of portable benefits. And it started making its way into the world of democratic policy thinking. So President Obama mentioned the idea of portable retirement benefits in his 2016 State of the Union. Secretary Clinton mentioned the idea on the campaign trail. Democratic senators as diverse in their views as Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, and Mark Warner have all discussed the concept of portable benefits. And this year, I believe we'll see legislation introduced, probably not passed, but introduced in a few state houses, including my own in Washington State, but I think probably in some other places too, that take different approaches to this question and this policy idea of portable benefits. So I think it's off to a good start, but I think we have to always remember that most big ideas in the American domestic policy over the course of the last 200 and some years have not started with an instantaneous adoption at the federal level. They've really started with a bunch of experiments at the state and local level. That was true in Washington State and Wyoming, even while they were territories, embraced the idea of women's suffrage. It was true when Massachusetts became the first to abolish child labor, or when Wisconsin introduced the concept of public employee collective bargaining. Things like marriage equality, things like healthcare reform have all been prototyped at the state or local level. And I think we're likely to see that very same pattern play out here as states and cities sort of grapple with what it means to have a workforce that's decreasingly tied to a single employer or a single job.
All right, David Rolf, president of SEIU 775, fastest growing union in the Northwest, representing home care and nursing home workers in Washington State and Montana. David, we appreciate you being with us today on americasdemocrats.org, and we look forward to having you back again soon. Thanks for having me. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to keep the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, on the air, and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press talks with Texas Congressman Al Green, who has called for Trump's impeachment.
So, Congressman, you've been stirring it up here a little bit. You made some big news last week with your speech on the floor of the House. The first congressman, and still the only member of Congress, to use the I word and suggest that President Trump has already committed enough sins that he ought to be considered for impeachment. Isn't it too early to get to go there?
Well, first, allow me to, again, thank you for the opportunity to take a message to the masses. And it's especially important that we have this opportunity because we're talking about obstruction of justice. There is a collusion allegation, and the collusion allegation may take a lot longer to develop. Many people think of conspiracy when they hear the word collusion, and they assume that there will be a meeting of persons who will have malice aforethought, and as a result of the meeting, there will be some scheme concocted, which is really not the case. But the point is, it's going to take longer to develop the collusion. The obstruction of justice is something that has already occurred. And because it has already occurred, it's not too early to talk about it. When the law has been breached by the chief executive officer of the most powerful country in the world, it cannot go unnoticed. The president breached the law. He obstructed justice when he decided to fire the chief investigation officer, the officer that was investigating him, Mr. Comey. And he decided to do so and told us why, because of the investigation. Now, I think that there are many people who would like to have that on a recording. If that recording could have been found, and if you heard him say it on the recording, it would seem that it would have more credibility in the minds of some.
Right.
There are many who don't want to believe that the president confessed on national TV when he talked to Mr. Holt. That is exactly what he did. And then when he went on to tweet what is tantamount to an intimidating statement, I think that those things combined would become the genesis, if you will, for the obstruction of justice.
And, of course, he did, Mr. Comey told us that the president called, asked him in the Oval Office to drop the investigation.
Yes.
And then we also have learned subsequent and following your speech on the floor that the president also called the director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, and called the head of NSA, right, yes. Mr. Kelly, Admiral Kelly, and asked them to come out publicly and say there was no collusion. Yes. So you might say there were 3 attempts, really, to
Well, there were multiple
justice.
Attempts. But when we get into those those bits of, I'm going to call them evidence, but when we get into that aspect of it, it's probably a better way of putting it. Those are things that you do need to investigate and you do need to confirm. But the president's own words are what I've dealt with. These are things that are beyond reproach. There's no debating that the president said these things. We still have to wait for Mr. Comey. We have to get the testimony from the others. But the president has, in his own words, made it possible for him to have impeachment charges brought against him. And, of course, we have to make it known continuously, repeatedly, to the point that it becomes superfluous. We have to make it known that impeachment doesn't mean the president is removed from office. He's not deposed. He will be exposed in the Senate, and then he's deposed after a trial in the Senate.
Right. We do remember that President Bill Clinton was impeached in the House, but remained president and finished his term.
Exactly, right. And Andrew Johnson as well. So it's we've had two presidents actually impeached. We had another to resign prior to being impeached. The important thing to remember about all of these things is that when the president commits an impeachable offense, the House is the jurisdiction. That's the place where it takes place. There are many people who seem to think, and I hear many talking about this, they seem to think that we can indict the president and we'll try him in some court of law. That's not going to happen. The president's not going to be indicted by the special counsel. He's not going to bring indictment charges and then take him before some competent court of jurisdiction, and as a result, the president will then go to trial. No. If there are charges, they will be brought in the House, and the president will then have to answer those charges in the Senate.
Now, Congressman, you have with you John Boniface from Free Speech for People. And, John, you've been our guest before.
Yes.
And I'm sure a lot of our listeners and a lot of our viewers are wondering what the two of you guys are doing here together, because when you've come in before, we have talked about an extremely important issue, which is all the money, special interest money in politics and how we get it out of politics.
Yes.
So answer the question, what is the connection between Free Speech for People and Congressman Al Green's mission here?
I'm honored to be on with Congressman Green and you, Bill, and thank you for having me. We're here today because we launched with Roots Action on Inauguration Day, impeachdonaldtrumpnow.org, a campaign calling for an impeachment investigation in light of the president's refusal to divest fully from his business interests, and as a result was on a collision course the day he took the oath of office with the two anti-corruption clauses of the Constitution. We have since expanded the grounds for our call for an impeachment investigation in light of the obstruction of justice that Congressman Green has so eloquently just discussed. And we now have over 1.1 million people all across the country signed up in support of this campaign at impeachdonaldtrumpnow.org. It is only going to grow over time. 9 communities around the country, including the L.A. City Council, have passed resolutions calling on Congress to take this action. And I want to be clear, Congressman Green is an American hero. He is standing up for our Constitution and our democracy at this critical moment in our history. We are facing a constitutional crisis. The president is openly defying the rule of law, openly engaged in impeding a criminal investigation that may incriminate himself and his associates, and we must hold him accountable via the impeachment process, and that's what Congressman Green is doing so eloquently.
Are we in a constitutional crisis? Do you agree, Congressman?
Well, I've not used that language, but
others have.
Others have, and yes. I just heard it, and I've heard it many times. And I'll tell you why I've stayed away from it, because when you are asked to define it, the definition can be nebulous at best, and so I've just stayed away from it. But I do not oppose persons who say it and oppose hearing it said. I think that it just depends on how you define constitutional crisis, and I do admire greatly what my friend is doing. He and his cohorts have given the American people a means by which they can participate in this process. It is a participatory democracy. And I encourage people to go online and to make your voices heard. This is a way for you to participate. Sign the petition. It will be the will of the American people that will drive the will of Congress. If the American people will speak up and stand up and have impeachment town hall meetings. You don't have to wait on a congressperson to have an impeachment town hall meeting. You can call one yourself
right.
and talk about this process. You can bring in
constituent town halls. Sure.
Exactly. And you can have a lawyer to come in and talk about it, or other persons. But this is where people can do what was believed to be the essence of democracy, and that is engage, be there. Make it government of the people, by the people, for the people, by being a part of the process.
And that website, again, is impeachdonaldtrumpnow.org?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Right. Now, so you raise the issue of the conflicts,
yes,
the business conflicts, and we've just seen them multiply, haven't we, Congressman
yes.
and John? I mean, in terms of, it's not just Donald Trump, it's Ivanka Trump and her line of
right.
It's Jared Kushner and his continued real estate deals where they cite the White House, and it's almost like you invest in this real estate project, you're going to have access to the White House. You got the Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C. It's multiple.
Probably the most stark example was with the EB-5 visa process. That's probably the most stark example. Because the EB-5 allows a person to expend $500,000 or $1 million, depending on how you approach the process, and it will put you on a pathway to citizenship. The process, EB-5s have some value because they bring jobs. There's no question that there is some value, but you should not be able to market this as a means by which you can become a citizen and then give the ostensible appearance, if you will, that your chief executive officer of the country somehow will find some pleasure and some favor with this if it happens. I think that there are little subtle things that are done.
It's almost like buying citizenship, isn't it? Or auctioning off citizenship.
The way it was being done there at that time was. I don't want to condemn all people who have engaged in the EB-5 process, but the way that was done was onerous and could create an additional opportunity for the president to have to face charges.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Vanessa Cardenas, David Rolf, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.